Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive? Today we're tackling Bayesian Bandits. Oh yeah, Bayesian Bandits. I love these. It might sound a little intimidating, but it's actually way more relatable than you might think. Just imagine, you're in a casino, and you've got a row of slot machines in front of you.
Ah, yes, the classic casino example.
Each machine has a different chance of paying out, right? But you have no idea which one is the best.
You're facing the multi-armed bandit problem. Each of those slot machines, that's an arm, and the dilemma is figuring out which one's going to give you the most winnings.
So it's this constant back and forth, right? Between sticking with what you think is the best or trying something new.
Explore or exploit.
Exactly. Do you keep playing that same machine and hope for a big win? Or do you jump to a new one that might be even better? And honestly, this isn't just about casinos, is it? We face this in our lives all the
All the time. I mean, just think about choosing a restaurant or trying to pick up a new hobbies or even just deciding what to watch on Netflix.
Yeah, deciding what movie to watch is always a struggle.
We're always trying to balance that exploration, trying something new with exploitation, going with what we already know and like.
So true. And businesses, they use this Bayesian Bandit approach for some pretty big decisions.
Yeah.
Like what ads to show you online or what news articles to put right at the top of a website.
It's all about optimization in the face of uncertainty. Businesses are gathering data nonstop, and they're using it to get better and better results as time goes on.
Which brings us to our deep dive today. We're going to be looking at a fictional company, Research Arms, Inc. They're using Bayesian Bandits to see how successful their military projects are. And they actually started off with a pretty simple model, based on success or failure. Kind of like A/B testing, but with 3 options instead of just 2.
Right. The source material dives into Bernoulli distributions as a great example of this kind of model. So think of each test of a new weapons system as a Bernoulli trial. Either it hits the target success, or it doesn't failure.
So they're running these trials for each project, and every new piece of information helps them update their understanding of the project's likelihood of success.
And here comes the cool part, the Bayesian magic. Instead of starting fresh with each new data point, Bayesian methods actually use prior knowledge as a starting point.
Okay, hold on. Prior knowledge. How do they even figure that out? It's not like they've got a crystal ball telling them which projects will be a hit, right?
Ha ha, no crystal ball needed. Choosing a prior comes from a mix of historical data, opinions from experts, and really understanding the problem they're tackling.
So give me an example.
Sure. So let's say Research Arms is working on a new type of missile, right? They might look at the success rates of similar missiles from the past, talk to their engineers about the challenges and the breakthroughs with this new design, and factor in things like what they're aiming at and the environment it'll be used in. All of that helps them create an initial belief in how likely this new missile project is to succeed.
So basically an educated guess based on everything they already know.
Exactly. And the beauty of Bayesian methods is that this initial belief, or prior, gets refined with each new piece of data. So the more tests they run, the more info they gather, their understanding of the project's real probability of success gets more and more accurate.
That's really cool. It's like they're always learning and tweaking their strategy as they go.
Exactly. And to show how this understanding evolves, the source material actually uses graphs of probability distributions.
Oh yeah, I saw those graphs.
Mhm.
I have to admit though, the way they were labeled with density instead of something like reward or payout, it threw me off a bit.
That's a really good point. And honestly, that's a pretty common mistake that can cause confusion.
Yeah, it can.
We need to remember that when we're looking at probability distributions, we're not just interested in the chances of something happening, but also in what happens if it does, right? It's not just, will this project work or not? It's also, if it works, what do we get out of it?
So we need to be looking at how likely something is to happen and what we could potentially get if it does.
Yeah, those graphs, they can be a bit misleading. Just because you see a sharp peak, which means a high probability, doesn't mean you've got the whole story.
So we need something more than just density on the graph, right? We need to see how that chance of success actually lines up with the reward.
Exactly. Imagine a graph where one axis is all about the probability of success, and the other axis shows you the potential reward. So a project that's likely to succeed but has a small payoff, that would be plotted pretty low. But a successful project with a massive payoff, that would be way up high, even if the chance of getting there is a little narrower.
I'm starting to see how much clearer this makes things. You
Yeah.
can really see the likelihood of success and how big the outcome could be.
And for research arms, that's huge. They're not just looking for projects that will probably work, they're looking for projects that will give them the biggest return on their investment. Now, the source material starts with those simple succeed or fail examples, but in the real world, payouts, they can get a lot more complex than that.
So it's not just a simple hit or miss. There could be different levels of success, and each of them has a different payoff.
Exactly. Think about it. One project might have a low chance of creating a revolutionary new weapon, but if it succeeds, the payoff is massive. Another project might be almost guaranteed to make a slightly better weapon, but the payoff is less exciting. Research arms has to look at those probabilities and weigh them against the potential rewards.
It's like comparing a high-risk, high-reward stock to a bond that's more stable but has lower returns. Speaking of different approaches, the source material mentions that research arms also tried using count data for evaluating their projects.
Yeah, they looked into using data like how many enemy targets did we hit, which seems pretty reasonable when you're assessing a weapon system.
Right. It's pretty intuitive. So why they ditch this approach? The source material mentions it was too unstable.
Well, there are a couple of reasons. First, unlike those straightforward success-failure scenarios, count data, it can have a much wider range of outcomes. You're not just dealing with hit or miss. You could have 0 hits, 1 hit, 2 hits, and so on.
So more variability means more uncertainty, which makes the insights less reliable.
Exactly. To model this count data, they use Poisson distributions. And to use those, you need a different kind of prior knowledge represented by gamma distributions.
Gamma distributions. That sounds a bit more complicated than those beta distributions we talked about before.
You're right, gamma distributions can be a bit trickier. They're very sensitive to outliers, and they can be prone to something called overdispersion, which basically means the data is more spread out than the model predicts.
So making decisions based on those gamma distributions, it could be a lot easier to make mistakes.
Yeah, and that complexity probably added to that instability they were seeing. When you're making big decisions like developing military tech, you need a model that gives you clear and dependable answers.
I can see why they stuck with the simpler approach, even if it meant losing a little bit of detail. But it's pretty amazing how Research Arms uses data to make these decisions. Right. They're not just messing around with spreadsheets, they're using real-time dashboards.
That's right. They're using Shiny, which is a framework for building interactive web applications in R.
So they're getting real-time updates as these projects are happening out in the field. That's next level.
It is. Imagine having a live feed of how your choices are playing out. It lets you adapt and tweak things so much faster. And this brings up a really important point that's relevant to a lot of our listeners. Secure data systems.
Especially when we're talking about sensitive military information, right? Security is crucial.
Absolutely. That's why they use a client-server setup. The heavy lifting, all the analysis, that happens on a super secure server, probably back at HQ. And then the dashboards are displayed on client devices like laptops or tablets that people can access securely out in the field.
It's so secure and real-time. That's really impressive. There was another detail in the source material that caught my eye, though. The example dashboard was labeled ABC, when it should have been Decision 1, Decision 2, Decision 3. Why does that little difference matter?
It's a subtle thing, but it's important. A/B testing, that usually means you're comparing just 2 options. Research Arms is looking at 3 options, so using decisions is a more accurate way to describe it, and it reflects that multi-armed bandit framework they're working with.
So it's not just about comparing 2 things, but exploring multiple possibilities at the same time.
Exactly. Using precise language is crucial to avoid confusion, especially when you're dealing with such complex decision-making. So we've seen how Research Arms uses Bayesian bandits, first with that simple success-failure model, and then exploring that count data, which ended up being too shaky for what they needed. And they've even brought real-time data into the mix with those secure dashboards.
It's been a fascinating look at how Bayesian bandits can be used in a high-stakes world like military tech. Now I'm curious, how can these ideas be applied in our listeners' lives?
It really makes you think about all the choices we have to make.
Right. It feels like we're always bombarded with choices, like every single day. Which career path should I take? Should I learn that new skill? Is that new restaurant worth trying? It can get overwhelming.
It really can. But instead of stressing out over every little decision or just going with your gut, you can approach things a little more experimentally. Think of yourself as running little trials to gather information.
I love that idea. So instead of spending hours debating whether to learn Python or JavaScript, I just pick one and start learning.
Exactly. And then you see what happens.
If I like it, awesome. If not, I can switch gears.
And each of those trials gives you valuable data that can shape your future decisions. It's kind of like having those real-time dashboards, but for your life.
So it's more than just trying things randomly. It's about learning from every experience. and using that knowledge to make better decisions in the future.
You got it. And the more you go through this process of trying things out and learning, the better you get at making choices that really align with what you want and what you enjoy.
So you don't have to worry about making the perfect decision right away. You don't need to have all the answers up front. You can adjust as you go.
Exactly. The Bayesian approach, it actually embraces uncertainty. It encourages you to be adaptable and open to new information. It's not about being right every time. It's about being willing to experiment and learn and refine how you make decisions over time.
That really takes the pressure off. It's not about the fear of making the wrong choice. It's about the excitement of learning and growing from every single experience.
I love that. And this isn't just for big life-changing decisions either. Think about things like trying out a new recipe or a new workout routine or even picking what book you want to read next.
Oh yeah, that's always tough.
You can use all those little choices as chances to learn more about what you like and ultimately create a more fulfilling life.
This has been such an eye-opening look at Bayesian bandits. Who knew they could be applied to so many things, from building crazy advanced military tech to the everyday decisions we all face?
It really highlights how powerful a data-driven and adaptive approach to decision-making can be. By taking in new information and refining our understanding, we can make choices that lead to better outcomes.
I hope everyone listening today feels inspired to try out this Bayesian bandit approach. It's been an amazing deep dive. As always, keep exploring, keep experimenting, and keep learning.